Hey everybody, this is Dave Dugdale, LearningDSLRvideo.com. A while back I did a behind the scenes video of a camera crew shooting with a Red Epic. A little after that I got an email from James Drake from 5K Insight. It's a local rental house for Red cameras, and he asked if I wanted to check one out and shoot with it a little bit. And I was like, sure, I'll give it a try, that sounds great. So we met up at Denver's Union Station in downtown Denver, and he gave me a tutorial on how to use it, and after the tutorial he let me shoot an interview of him using his Epic. It's an interesting tutorial and interview because he relates a lot of stuff from the DSLR world into the Epic world, since he owns a Canon 5D as well himself. I think it's worth watching, or at least bookmarking, because in the future you guys might be intermixing footage with your DSLR to the Red Epic, or Scarlett for that matter, in the future. Or you might be doing an entire shoot with it if the client has the budget for that. So right now I'm in the process of learning how to take the footage that we got of the interview and manage the workflow to actually publish the video interview, which is kind of interesting how the whole process works. And I'll be publishing that interview pretty soon.
Okay, so if you wanted to, say, come from like a DSLR and jump onto the Red Epic, it's a little bit of a transition for sure, but there's a lot of similarities. So you're still gonna set your ISO, you're still gonna set your aperture the same, you just have a few more features, if you will. It's almost as if you're shooting the picture mode on your DSLR, but now in video. We'll go ahead and boot it up here. So we got the power button on this side, just hit that. Great thing about the Epic is it's 8 to 10 second boot time. The Red one was famous for a 90-second boot time, so it's sped it up a little bit, which is great. The great thing about this camera is it has a very easy to use touch interface.
Oh, it's touch, okay.
So I don't know if you can see this, but you can just go in here and say you want to shoot at 24, the golden standard these days. You just tap on your frame rate here, scroll to 24, pretty easy. There you go, you're at 24 frames per second. Same thing with your shutter speed, you can change that. Your white balance, which we'll talk about that in a minute. And then of course your aspect ratios, which that's something that is a little different from your DSLR, which shoots only 16:9, or I guess SD if you really wanted to. So let's say you want to set your white balance, and right now we're at 5600K, which is actually pretty close for this room, but let's say you want to change it. And again, it's metadata, so you can change it in post, and it's non-destructive.
Okay.
But you go ahead and tap that, and then you choose your white balance, let's call it 5000K, which just happens to be the native temperature of the sensor. So there you go, you've just changed it. The other option is we have all these buttons on the side handle over here. These are all custom assignable. So we've particularly chosen to put white balance as B for balance. And then you just find your white card, which we don't have set up, but, oh, perfect. So you put your white card in front, or your gray card, and you go ahead and hit B, and then you'll notice after you've hit B, oh, we're good, thanks.
Okay.
You now have a custom white balance, 5103 Kelvin.
Wow, it's pretty exact.
It's very exact, yeah. So that's one way to do it, but again, because it's raw, you can change it in post, and it's not really affecting your footage in any way, which is really cool. Very fast fixes for color correction. 1 second about resolution. The video mode of this camera is a lot like the stills mode on a DSLR.
Okay.
So your stills on your T2i are basically the video mode of this camera.
Okay.
So you're shooting 14 megapixel, thereabouts, video. 5120 by 2700 resolution is your full frame 5K.
Okay.
So that allows you to do a lot of stuff like punch in. You can punch in 400% to 1080.
In post.
So you get multiple shots out of one shot.
Okay.
Right. And it also allows you to do some incredible image stabilization in After Effects. You have so much information to work with, it can really start to do some sharp stabilization. And this camera has a ton of modes that you can choose for resolution. For the sake of time, we'll just talk about 5K at the moment. You have 5K full frame, which utilizes the full sensor. That's your 5120 by 2700 resolution there. You have 5K 2:1, which you'll notice here is slightly...
Okay, I saw it.
So you're punching in a little bit, and that's not quite the full sensor, but it's something that people generally like to shoot for 16:9.
Okay.
And then you have your 5K widescreen, which you'll notice is very much more, it's like a 235 you'll see on Vimeo all the time.
Yeah.
A lot wider, And this particular mode allows you to maximize the amount of frames per second you can shoot. So if you can imagine 1080 is, you know, right here. You're cutting off the sides. Okay. So let's talk about setting exposure a little bit. It's a little more intense than perhaps on your DSLR because you kind of have to reframe thinking on shooting on the Epic. Because it's raw data, you really want to shoot so you don't clip. And the camera will tell you in many ways what clipping looks like. Okay. But you don't necessarily, it's just a little different from DSLR because DSLR you really want to dial in your look and if you can light it exactly like you want to shoot it. And you still, of course, want to light on this and still want to get your image looking great. But the best option you have on the Epic is to prevent anything from clipping because you have all that data you can move around in post. So that being said, the very basic functions down here with the histogram show you little goal post here, goal post there. And I don't know if you can see this on the camera, but there's this little bar that has red, and that shows you how much you're blowing out, how much you're clipping, more or less.
That's as close as you can go with that lens.
Yeah, no, it's perfect.
Okay. So that's the highlights.
Yes, that's your highlights. So you'll notice if I'm just gonna change my T-stop or f-stop on your DSLR, that is gonna go down pretty quick. And you'll notice that out here, which is where it's blowing out, now you're not clipping. You have a little blue spike there because it's the sky, but you're not clipping anything.
Interesting.
However, conversely, you now have clipping on the shadow side, meaning that you have a little bit of detail in noise. That's where the noise floor is. Okay. So you want to find your ideal exposure where you can get the least amount of clipping here and the least amount there. You'll notice here, very little on both. Okay. Gotcha. So now you have the sky and you have inside. Okay. The other really great thing about the Epic is it gives you a few more tools than your DSLR might to help you set exposure, see exactly what the sensor's seeing. So we'll go under settings here and hit display, and you'll hit tools, and you'll notice you have a myriad of things. Some of these are for focus, so we'll just talk about the exposure ones. The exposure tool here will show you a black and white overlay. So you're seeing a black and white image, but it'll do red for clipped, and then purple for underexposed. Okay. So red is dead, purple is black. Okay. So you'll see here that we are slightly clipping, bring your exposure down a hair, boom, gone. Cool. So then there you're out, and you just come barely under.
That red goes off that bar graph, then okay.
Exactly. Cool. So we can turn that off. The other option we have is false color mode, and false color is essentially a range of colors. So if you're shooting an interview, kind of like zebra bars on Sony camera or whatever, you can set your exposure based on colors. Okay. So pink is like Caucasian 55 or 60%, and there's, you can look up the colors online, but usually darker blues are the darker side and yellow reds are the higher side. So there's a spectrum there, which is really helpful if, like I said, you're shooting interviews or something like that. On Canon DSLRs, you have your picture profiles. Everybody loves the cine style, and everybody loves their neutral profiles. You can do a lot of the same stuff on the Epic. It actually gives you a lot more control, and those are called looks. And you can actually create looks on the computer in the Red Cine X program and import them into the camera. Or, if you're just on set and you have to adjust the contrast or saturation, you can do that pretty quickly by going into your look tab here. You got a myriad of options to work with, and you can just jump up your saturation. Oh, wow. You can mess with your contrast. You can do all kinds of stuff. You can shoot in black and white. Wow. Now, the cool thing about this is it's just metadata. So you can mess your settings up and make it look really bad, go back to the computer, reset it all to default, and then start from ground zero.
That's cool. So this would be pretty much the case of the client is sitting at the monitor, you want to make it a little bit prettier for them.
Sure. Yeah, you don't want them to see that really flat image. They'll be like, why am I paying attention?
Crank up the contrast a little bit, add a little bit more saturation if you want.
Sure.
Okay.
The Epic offers interchangeable lens mounts, and there's more being developed. But currently available, there's a titanium PL mount, an aluminum Canon mount, and a titanium Canon mount. And currently we have the PL mount on here, so you'll see we have a Zeiss CP2 lens. So if you want to set your aperture, you go ahead and do that right here on the lens. And it has the teeth, so if you wanted to, you could set up a rack aperture, if you will. However, if you switch to the titanium Canon mount or the aluminum Canon mount, stick it on here, you can control your aperture just like you would on a DSLR in the camera. And it also supports IS, autofocus, just like it would on your DSLR, except suddenly you're shooting at 5K resolution, which is pretty cool. Let's talk about focus for a second here. On your DSLR, you have your nice little 5 times, 10 times punch in, which is great. Yeah, you can do the same thing here. Again, these are custom assignable buttons. So if you want to focus here, we have our C button here set to 1:1.
Okay.
So you go ahead and hit C, focus on women up there.
Okay. And
now you're in 1:1. And with our follow focus up here, go ahead and set your focus. Boom. Clean.
Okay.
Hit it one more time, back to normal.
Okay.
The other options you have on, just like on another, video camera, you have edge focus, which is pretty cool. Essentially inverse the image and just gives you, so if we go out of focus here, it'll show you how it blurs out there. So you come into focus, boom, you're sharp. And then the other option is a focus mode, which essentially is an over sharpening of just this image. It's not recording this, but
it really is sharp.
It'll sharpen it up a lot. So your AC, if he's looking through, this monitor here, can really get a sense of what's sharp and what's not. Okay, so right here you got a very expensive SD card. Well, it's actually an SSD. It's actually a drive, much like you'd fit in your MacBook. It's incredibly fast, writes up to 225 or 250 megabytes per second. Very cool. So the camera, your DSLR shoots about 44 megabit per second, H.264. This thing at its max settings will write 26.2 megabytes per frame. So you can burn through a 128 gig SSD in just a few minutes at 5K resolution at a high frame rate. So it'll eat data pretty quick.
For slow motion type stuff.
Sure. If you're just shooting standard 24, you can get, without going too much into compression ratios, you can get around 20 to 30 minutes of 5K footage on a 128 SSD, which on a narrative film is perfect. I mean, that's very similar to what you used to shoot in the film days. And generally speaking, you're not shooting a 20-minute shot, you're shooting 30 seconds here, 20 seconds here. So it speed-wise really works out great. We have 4 of these, so if you have a DIT data manager on set, we've never had a problem keeping up with it with 4 128 gig cards. So the Epic now has playback. Didn't for a while, and it was a little bit like the film days, but now it does. Now it's a real video camera. And you go ahead and hit this triangle, the play button up in the top corner, and then you'll notice we have our playback, and we have some shots here of Union Station. So you go ahead and load those, and voila, we just loaded a clip. This is a 5K file here, and you can actually look at what it is. I'm sorry, it's a 4K file, and here's all your information, your metadata. And again, a lot of these are things like the tint, you can change that non-destructively in post. Anyway, cancel out of that. And its playback function, much like most other cameras, but there's a couple extra tricks. So you can play back like normal, but you can also use this touch screen to scroll through your video. This is a bad example, but if you're panning through and you're like, where's that part where we come back? You can pan back through it, and there it is, there's Union Station. You can also set in and out points. So let's say you want to start it right at this pan. Okay, boom, there's your in point, and going a little too fast here. There's your out point. So you'll see up here, you have your in and out point set. Now the rest of this data hasn't been deleted, but this information transfers when you go to the computer. So if you have a really long shot, or you have a slow motion shot where you really only need 2 seconds of it, but it's a 30-second long shot, you can select it in the field, and then when your editor comes into Red Cine X, they can see those in and out points set. The really cool thing about the Epic is, of course, the form factor. The red one was a great camera. It's a little bit bigger. This camera can really strip down, and it doesn't look too small in this configuration, but check this out. First of all, I'll actually hand this to you. This is a red volt, and instead of this battery back here, this V-mount red brick, which has some weight to it, we can use that instead. Now the battery life on this is a little shorter, but we can strip the camera out here. It's on a quick release system. And now we're starting to look a little more like a DSLR. So we'll go ahead and stick our red volt battery in here. And then you'll see our power light's back on. Shoot the camera on, and now all of a sudden you're shooting 5K run and gun. And there's a lot of options, of course, but you can really really start to strip the camera down and get into tight spaces. So you have your remote timer on your DSLR, right, to do your time lapses, things like that. The Epic has something a little different, the red mode. And what the red mode allows you to do is start and stop recording wirelessly. So got your camera up on a 30-foot jib or something like that. This is great for that. It actually has the ability to show you all the metadata, which you can change, and it shows you a little histogram. It does all the stuff that you can see on the camera, aside from just the live view. It allows you to change it all wirelessly, which is really cool. Showing you an overview of the camera, some of the functions you can do, and it may seem a little overwhelming coming from a DSLR, but the reality is you set up your exposure, you get your shot right, you shoot, and you got your images in 5K. Pretty basic.
I just wanted to say thanks to Patrick Downey, who actually took my Canon T2i and filmed this whole tutorial for you, because I was, entranced watching James give the tutorial. So thanks for Patrick, and that's pretty much it. Watch for the other videos, should be coming out pretty shortly, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.